Okay, so with artificial lighting, there are a series of things that we can start looking at. Um, a lot of the lights that are standard lights are attached to things like ceilings and walls because that's where they're sort of naturally hosted. And I do want you guys to get into using those, but specifically when you guys have lighting, your lighting class with Bruce in probably 2 more semesters, you guys actually take all these tools and apply them at a really high level. So this is sort of an introductory level thinking of lighting. So we'll look at both, and then I'll show you exactly how I want you guys to use this as sort of a base mode of thinking with artificial lighting and Revit. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is load in a couple of lights. So I'm going to go Component, Load Family, Lighting, Architectural, Internal, and let's do a wall sconce. So this is sort of a nice one to use here. Let's see if we can enlarge that just a little bit. Not really. Let's do the flat round wall sconce as a starting point. So that's going to show up in my properties panel just like anything else. And I'm going to go to my level 1 floor plan, and if I go to component, my lights are going to show up in my component list. There's no specific button for lighting yet. I kind of wish there was. It'd be a little easier to teach, but they're just going to show up as part of your component. So I'm going to select the wattage and voltage. Primarily for your base understanding, look at wattage in terms of brightness. So, I select a 100 watt version. It's going to be slightly brighter. And as I zoom in on an area to place this, you'll kind of note it's not actually letting me select anything. I'm getting that sort of can't do it icon. And that's simply because I don't have any walls in my scene. So a sconce is something, it's a wall-mounted light fixture, and in Revit, it has to have a host. Okay, so it's actually looking for a wall to place this sconce on. So without a wall, it's not going to put it anywhere. So if I put in a quick wall, let's just go wall, we'll draw one in, sort of right down the middle of this space here. So now that I have a wall, then I can go component, and now I can begin placing these sconces to either side of the wall. So if I look at that in 3D, what I should see is this wall right down the middle, and you can see the two sconces on either side. So same thing with the ceiling-based fixtures. Okay, so a can light or any type of light that I might put in a drop ceiling or something like that, I'm going to run into the same situation. So let's go component, load family, lighting, architectural, internal, ceiling light. So it's sort of a standard ceiling light that you might see. I'm going to look at my level 1 reflected ceiling plan. And so again, I don't have any place that I can place that light. So ceiling light, there's my linear box 1 foot by 4 foot ceiling light, and I don't have anything I can place that on. I can come in and do a ceiling, and I'm just going to sketch a ceiling into this space like that. So now I have this sort of hideous drop ceiling in place, but said hideous drop ceiling will allow me to host a series of lights. So my result, again, if I look at this, is something like that. Okay, so one of the things to think about as I'm doing these lights, if you notice, all of these things are very carefully hosted. They're put in sort of in an exact location, and they will all work in general. But one of the things to remember is this is a very realistic lighting system. If I build something, so what I'm going to do next is sort of build a custom light fixture. After we do a quick rendering. But if I build a light fixture and I put a light inside of the light fixture, there's a good chance that it's not going to work, because it's actually just going to light up the interior of that container. So you have to be really careful in terms of how you put these. And there's a lot of times where I'll have a student say, well, I placed all these lights and none of them work, and it'll end up they're actually inside of a wall or above the ceiling. And all it's going to do is illuminate the space above the ceiling or illuminate the space inside of the wall. So as you're building the custom versions, you have to really pay close attention and remember that there is a certain level of realism to this. So let's go ahead and let's build a 3D view. So I'm going to go back to my level 1 floor plan, and let's just build a view sort of from the end of this dock, looking right across this. And let's go to the teapot. And I'm going to set my rendering quality to low just so I can render through these quickly. And I'm going to click render. So this is just sort of the first base test render. And if you notice, my setting right here is exterior sun only. So essentially this means I haven't turned on the light switch for the renderings yet. Okay, so that's the first thing that you've got to remember is by default I'm rendering only with the sunlight. I can switch my scheme right here to artificial only and click render. And now one of the first things you should notice, I'm rendering 8 artificial lights. Okay, so now I've got that same rendering on with only my artificial lights. Now, it actually looks a little better on the large monitor here than it does on my computer monitor, but it's definitely a little bit dark. So no different than taking a picture with a camera. Remember, you're really not doing lighting simulation, okay? You're taking a picture. So no different than adjusting the aperture and the f-stop on a camera. I can do the exact same thing here. So remember that. Remember, everybody's eyes work a little bit different either. So you're not really rendering a simulation of light when you're building these images. You're building a really good image. So like lock that in your head. It's like a really important thing. If I want to do lighting simulation, there's a tool for that, and it's going to give me a scientific readout, and what you probably will learn in Bruce's class is foot candles. That is your lighting simulation, and that is going to give you a precise level of what's happening. This is simply about building the right kind of image. So inside of my exposure control, I can work this just like I would work a camera. So I might want to make the image a little bit brighter and apply. And yeah, that just about did it. Just tweaking that just a little bit brighter to kind of get the idea of what I want those spaces to look like. So, I mean, it's a pretty simple tool set to start working with. Now, the other thing that you can start rendering with is sun and artificial together. So I'm going to go back to adjust exposure. Let's reset this to defaults. And then we'll re-render. And this will give you some quality of these artificial lights, but really not much. And that's simply because of the science behind how this is working. The sun is so much brighter than those artificial lights that when you turn both on, you're not going to see much of the results when you're comparing the sun to an artificial light. Essentially, the best I can describe it is the mathematics of the mental ray render engine in terms of how it's simulating light and light bouncing around. It's just not bright enough. The artificial lights are just not bright enough to begin to take that into account, those two disparities of light. So if you need that kind of rendering, again, you kind of have to go back in and tweak things. And essentially what I do is I up the brightness on those artificial lights by a factor of about 10 if I want them to look correct. So the tricky thing for this is a lot of times you're working on a project and you don't want to get too far into picking fixtures, those kind of things. We just want the idea of artificial lights. So what I want you guys doing on this next assignment is not actually working with these kind of things. I want you working within your designs and not worrying about, is this a ceiling fixture or a wall fixture? I just want you to build a default light, just a floating orb of light that you guys can position anywhere. Because when you're just doing your design thinking, when you're early in the design process, I would rather you think about, I really want a light source here. And then eventually I know I'm going to design the fixture around that or select a fixture to go around that. So the process of doing that's slightly different. but it's really a useful tool for early design development in terms of understanding what the building is going to look like when you flip it, between day and night, which is to me, it's a massively sort of forgotten element of design, is what these buildings are going to look like at night, how we can make them look really cool and exciting and interesting and avoid light pollution, things like that, not just put hundreds of beams of light up into the air and sort of wreck the light quality of our cities in terms of washing out the night sky. So let's look at how we can get some cool lighting effects in this, but still keep things underneath the canopy with these custom light fixtures. So I'm going to go big R, new, and we're going to build a new light family. Okay, so this is where I would set up building basically a new component that I could use anywhere. So I'm going to go new, family, and again I'm going to go to lighting, architectural, internal. Well, no, that's not the right way to go at all. Let's see here. I'm going to have to remember where my families are. Drat. Oh, these are the things that happen when your installation of Revit goes wrong. New family. That's my library. I need my families. Family templates. There we go. English. Where are all the metrics in English? Oh, because I needed imperial, probably. Is it imperial? English imperial. There we go. English I. Your guys, probably when you go new family, it should bring you right to this section. My installation of Revit went a little wacky on me. So basically, I'm going to go new family, and I'm just going to select this default lighting fixture. So basically, this is just a ball of light, and it exists anywhere. I can place it anywhere. It's not hosted. So the difference between that, there's a ceiling-based light fixture, and there's a wall-based lighting fixture, and then this one is just essentially a light. So I'm going to do that. And when I look at that family, just kind of look at it in 3D, it's essentially just this big round ball of light. And there are a couple of things I can do with that based on the type of lighting effect that I might want. So inside of this family, I can click it and say light source definition. And there's some key elements that I can work with. So right now, it's just you can think of this as just a light bulb, just a lamp, essentially. So I have a spherical ball of light, and it's emitting light from all directions, okay? So I can change that to a linear light. So it's emitting from that kind of shape. I can then change that to a spotlight kind of thing. So maybe that would be a better configuration. Emit light from a point and make it like a spotlight. I can also switch this to a square, which then a spotlight wouldn't make much sense. I would do a square and then half, something like that. So just kind of look at that result. So that might be a really good ceiling-based light, something like that. The last option right here would be an IES file, and that is, or a photometric web, which typically I would load in what's called an IES file, and that if you go to a lighting manufacturer's website, they'll have those definitions for you. If I want to use that light, they'll have that definition. I can load it in, and it's going to emit a light exactly like that light fixture actually would, which is really nice. So I'm just going to stick with a point light kind of distribution, and I'm going to say OK. And then I'm going to go the big R, and I'm going to save this family. Just write it to my desktop right now. I'm just going to call it point light. And I'm going to say load into project, and I'm going to select my project right here. So with this, I can come in and just, it really doesn't care, which is nice. I'm going to go not model in place. I'm just going to go component. There's my point light, and I can just select anywhere along this. I'm going to select here and here and here because I'd like to light up those columns. And then when I go to my 3D view, I was putting those right along these columns, but if you'll notice, there's not anything showing up. And so we actually need to turn on in Revit, in our view, we need to turn on the light fixtures so we can see them. So that is, again, if I don't have anything selected, my properties panel is going to be the properties for my view. So I'm going to go to edit, or excuse me, visibility and graphics override right here. And I'm going to go down to lights. And right here, if you remember that, what my family was, it was only the light source, nothing else. So I just need to turn on light source so I can actually see my light fixtures. And now you can see them there. These little dudes right here. And what I really want is I want to kind of hide those guys sort of right down in these little cubbies to get some cool lighting effects. So I'm just going to go to, I'm hoping I can do it in one of my elevations. Same thing, going to go back and turn on my light fixtures in this view. Wrong button. There we go. Lighting fixtures, light sources, okay. Change this to a wireframe and select each of those guys. I'm going to move them down. Sit there right in line with my floor. I'm going to go back to level 1. Same thing. Turn on the light fixtures really quick. JK, light sources, okay. Let's slide these guys. Move. Let's move them right to there. So again, I'm being very careful about making sure they're in the right location. In fact, let me move them where there's just a little bit more room. Let's do that right there. Let's go either side of the column. And I'll copy the whole group of them. Let's just light up both sides of those columns. That'd be cool. And then I'm going to do one more group of them. Let's go component, point light. And let's go ahead and get a few lights here and here. Let's see where those are at. They should be up a little bit higher. Back to my east elevation. So those aren't hosted by anything just yet. Again, they're just floating in space, but they're going to help me early on with sort of my design process and thinking about where I'd like lights at to enhance what I'm trying to do architecturally. So let's go back to this 3D view. Rendering, artificial only. Render, I should see 5 lights. It's got 8 lights. Oh yeah, because I copied them over. Yep. 6 plus 2 more, 8. So you can see the lights starting to come from the location below the columns. 2 more point lights up here. I'm going to go back to adjust exposure. Make this a little bit brighter. And get that kind of rendering. Cool. So super simple to do, a little bit steppy in terms of building the families for those point lights, but really effective and really effective results just like immediately in terms of working through those artificial lighting definitions. Really a great set of tools to experiment with what you can do with artificial light in building design.